Hello, this is John from caveofprogramming.com. In this video we're going to take a look at function types and function references in Kotlin. First, let's create a little program using concepts you'll already be familiar with. I'm going to create a function which I'll call add. Let's give that two parameters, one called x of type int and one called y of type int. And I'll say that this function returns an int. So to implement this, I just want to return x plus y like this. The function just adds x to y and returns the result. In fact, we could implement this more succinctly just by doing equals x plus y. Now let's imagine I have a variable of type int. Let's say value of type int equals 7. We could run println and print the result of doing add on value and let's say 8. And we get the result printed 15. So we can see from this program that there are certain things that you can do with integers and integer type variables. So you can make variables reference integers. You can pass variables or even just integer literals to functions. You can return variables from functions and so on. Now there's this notion in programming of a first-class citizen. If an entity is a first-class citizen, it means that operations that are generally available to other entities are also available to that entity. And in Kotlin, functions are first-class citizens. This means that all the things that we can do with integer literals or integer type variables, for example, we can also do with functions. We can pass functions to other functions. We can return functions from functions. We can store references to functions in variables and so on. Let's create a variable that could refer to this add function. So I'll create a variable called sum, and now we need to specify its type. So whereas here we have an integer type, now we need some kind of function type that expresses the idea that this variable could refer to a function. In particular, if we want it to refer to add, we need this variable to be able to refer to a function that has two integer parameters and returns an integer result. We can specify that the function that this variable will refer to has two integer parameters by putting round brackets here, and we can just write int, comma, int in the round brackets. What about the return type? Well, it would look weird to put colon int here because there's already a colon there. So instead of this, Kotlin has a special syntax for expressing the return values of function types. We just use an arrow like this, which is pretty intuitive, I think. If we want, we can name these function parameters, so I could call that x and I could call this one y, but it's not mandatory. Now we have a variable that could refer to a function that has two integer parameters and returns an int. But how do I set it equal to this function? How do I make it refer to this function? To do that, we use a special operator consisting of a double colon, and then we just need the name of the function. So sum now refers to this add function, and that means that I can use it as if it was the add function. Let's write here println sum, and I'll pass in two values like 2 and 3. So we're just printing the return value of sum. If I run that, it works as you expect and we get 5. So we could even use a function type like this to specify the type of a function parameter, enabling us to pass a function to another function. For this video, let's just take a look at one more simple example. If I do println hello, and then we examine how println here is defined, it takes one parameter, which is called message here, of type any ? And it returns unit. Any is actually a class, which is the root of the class hierarchy in Kotlin. Since everything in Kotlin is basically an object, that means everything in Kotlin is basically a kind of any. So using any as a function parameter allows us to pass basically anything to the println function. The question mark, of course, says that this parameter is also nullable, so we could pass null to println. And we have seen examples of doing that in previous videos. Now what if we want a variable that refers to println or could refer to println? Let's create a variable which I'll call show. It's going to accept one parameter of type any, which I'm going to say is nullable. And it's going to return unit, which here is mandatory. We have to specify the return type of unit. then I could set that equal to print line just using this double colon. Now we've got a variable called show of a function type, which we've made refer to print line, so I could use it just like print line. So if I say show hi there, and then I run that, we get hi there coming out on the console. There's a lot more we can do with function types, and there are various ways in Kotlin of implementing functions that you can then make variables of function types refer to. And we're going to take a look at that in subsequent videos. That's it for this particular video. Until next time, happy coding.